I've got my own timer. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
All right. Wow. I'm Robbie Bobby.
Hello, Robbie Bobby.
And the topic today is step one. Step one is usually a popular topic in January. I guess, first month, first step. But if you admit you're powerless only in January, you're going to have a pretty miserable February through December. So I figure it's good to check in with it. Anyway, the slogan, or not slogan, phrase, as we understood, normally applies to, God or higher power. But to me, that could be applied to any program word, including powerless. My understanding of God has changed quite a bit over the years in program. My understanding of powerless has changed quite a bit over the years. And of course, my understanding with something affects my relationship with it. My relationship with powerless or powerlessness has had three distinct stages. Denial, acceptance, and more recently, gratitude. So I'm going to start at the beginning. Before I came into program, I was trying to fix a teenage son with a substance abuse problem. And at that time, powerless was not in my vocabulary. I used to think, and I used to actually say out loud to people, there's no problem I can't solve. And at work, that was kind of close to true. But dealing with a 15-year-old's behavior and substance abuse problem, not so much. My tools were lecturing, punishing, threatening, cajoling, and controlling. And over the next couple of years, it would seem at times that my strategy was not working, right? But I say seem because I liked my strategy. I thought it was a good strategy. I thought it just needed more time. And so this, if you haven't guessed, this is the denial stage of my relationship with Powerless. And then something happened, right? The shit was hitting the fan, and something snapped in my head. And again, I didn't know the word powerless, but what I kept saying over and over out loud is, I'm done, I'm done, I'm done. And I was done. This marks the end of my denial stage. And what it marked was the beginning of awareness, which I see as being part of acceptance. In other words, even the stages have stages, and I see acceptance as this umbrella where awareness is the first stage. So it was a very low-level acceptance because I still believed that a smarter, stronger, more cunning person would be able to fix my son, which implies that if I had the energy to get back into the ring, maybe read a few more books or what have you, maybe I could, get the job done. Or at least another human being would be able to do this. So this was where I was. And I got my son into an IOP, intensive outpatient program. They directed me to Alanon, and Alanon is a sister program to Alanon. And I get to my first meeting, and over the next coming few weeks, I get to know the people in this group. And there's a doctor, there's a lawyer, there's a therapist, there's a guy who used to be a sergeant in Vietnam, who was also super smart. This guy was like a walking encyclopedia. And it dawned on me, there are people in this group who are smarter and stronger and more cunning than me, and they've all admitted that they're powerless. In fact, the whole fellowship admits they're powerless. That's step one. So this started to expand my acceptance. And it allowed me to start looking at myself. And that took time, to do that. And as I started to become aware of my own character defects, which, by the way, I realized were what actually brought me into program. is my own character defects. But as I started to uncover and discover these things, I treated them the same way I treated my son in the beginning. In other words, now that I have this awareness of these defects, I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to do something. So I did a 6 and 7, step 6 and 7, but it was lip service. In other words, I thought, yeah, maybe God can assist me, right? But I'm going to do the heavy lifting. I'll do the heavy lifting. So, and that's how I went for the next couple of years. That was my relationship with the Powerless. And then something else happened. And again, the shit was hitting the fan. And this time it was my own, nothing to do with my son. And it was my own defects kicking my ass. And again, something snapped, just like it had earlier. And this time it was recognizing that I'm powerless over my own defects. And that was like a real wake-up call, because it was like, I'm not only powerless over other people, I'm powerless over myself. I'm powerless over my own defects. And that forced me to get much closer to a God of my understanding and to really figure out what that was. And so that now expanded my acceptance even further, right? Powerless over my son, I'm powerless over my own defects. And I thought, wow, I've arrived. Like, this is like the highest level I can be, with my acceptance. And that's where I was for the next couple of years. And then last year, I went on this pilgrimage in Spain. I've talked to some of you about it. It's called the Camino de Santiago. It's a 500-mile walk across northern Spain with just a little backpack and on your own feet from start to finish. And it's a very spiritual experience. And I would say by the first or second weekend, I started to see God's hand in everything. And I can see everything had a purpose. Even before I got there, like deciding which day to go, which I did a month out, allowed me to meet all the people I was supposed to meet. If I had showed up a day earlier, a day later, I wouldn't have met any of those people. And I could see God's hand in it. And so when I finished this and came home, there were a lot of lessons that I learned on this Camino. And one of my goals was taking the lessons that I learned there and bringing them back to what I call the big Camino, which is life. I see the 500-mile walk as the little Camino, which teaches me how to walk in the big Camino. So in this idea that God's hand is on everything, I'm looking back at other areas of my life and trying to look at it that way. And to see this, you have to look through a spiritual lens. Otherwise, you're not going to see it. But when I do, I see, because I was asking myself, I thought about powerlessness, which is that just by chance? Is it just random? Which I always thought it was. Or is there a purpose? So when I looked at it, I looked at my son, I thought to myself, if I had the power to fix him, or could acquire the power to fix him, I would have. There's no doubt about it. I would have. And that would have deprived him of his spiritual journey. It would have deprived him an opportunity to get close to a God of his understanding. I would have screwed up the whole plan, you see. And God knows that. God knew that. Robbie, I got to make you powerless. Sorry, I got to make you powerless. You'll screw this whole thing up. And then when it comes to being powerless over my own defects, it's the same deal. Because if I could have fixed myself, I would have. And I wouldn't have moved closer to a God of my understanding. I would have screwed up. I would have become my own higher power. I would have become my son's higher power. Would have screwed everything up. So now I look at powerlessness and I can say, thank God for powerlessness. Right? Thank God for powerlessness. And to me, that's such a good thing, because step one is the foundation of all the steps. So if you can have gratitude for powerlessness, that's a strong foundation, right? It's a strong foundation. So just to be clear, it's not like I don't want you to think I'm always floating in this gratitude, right? I'm probably more in acceptance. Sometimes I get kicked back down to denial, and then I'm back up to acceptance. But at least I've experienced, the gratitude for, and it gives me something to work towards. Like, that's where I want to be. It's such a good feeling when you can be there. So that is my share. That although I focused in on powerlessness and the purpose of powerlessness. The topic is more broad. It's all of step one. So I invite shares on anything to do with step one or anything in general. It's a beginner's meeting, so all shares are welcome. And thank you for listening.
Thanks so much, Rob. So we'll have a 1-minute meditation.